Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to talk about parabolas. So we're going to concentrate on everything that we've done with parabolas in the standard form. It shouldn't take too long. It should be less than 15 minutes. It's going to be a recap of everything we did prior to our winter break. And after that, you're going to do your assignment and just turn it in online. So let's get started. The first thing I want to talk about is whether a parabola opens up or down. And this is something that you guys have gotten pretty good at. I need to look at my A value. If my A value is positive, then my parabola opens up. If my A value is negative, it opens downwards. So this is something that we should have written down. It's very simple. We should never get this question wrong. So if A is bigger than 1, if A is positive, then my parabola opens up. If A is negative, or if A is less than 1, then my parabola opens downwards. And that is it. So I look at A, and again in standard form I have ax squared plus bx plus c, so A is my first value. I look at A is a positive 2, therefore my parabola opens upwards. And that is it. That's all I have to do. Now, following that, whether it opens up or down, it also tells me whether I have a maximum or a minimum point. If I look at this little rough sketches that I have here, if I have a parabola that opens up, then that's going to automatically create a minimum value all the way at the bottom. If I have a parabola that opens downwards, then that's going to create a maximum point at the top. So this is going to be a minimum. If I have a positive A, I'm going to have a minimum. If I have a negative A, I'm going to have a maximum. And that's always automatic. That always follows that order. All right, so does this have a minimum or a maximum? Well, because I know that I have a upwards parabola, I'm going to have a minimum value. Number 3, find the vertex. Well, in order for me to find the vertex, and the vertex is always going to be some x comma some y, I need to find the x first. Once I find the x, I can plug that input in and get the y out. Now, the only thing I know here for sure is that the equation for the axis of symmetry is x is equal to. X is equal to what? Well, x is equal to negative b over 2a. And that's constant. That is the equation for the axis of symmetry, and that will always be what we start with. Now, these letters, again, come from me having ax squared plus bx plus c. So if my original equation was y is equal to 2x squared plus 8x plus 6, then I'm looking at my a value, my b value, and my c value. Now my b has to be negative, so that doesn't mean the number is always going to be negative. It's just going to be the opposite of whatever b I see in my equation. So in my equation I have a positive 8, therefore my b here is going to be negative 8. So this will be x is equal to negative 8 divided by 2 times the value of a. Well, the value of a here is 2, so this will be 2 times 2. So let's rewrite this as x is equal to negative 8 divided by 2 times 2 is 4, and negative 8 divided by 4 is negative 2. Again, all that gives me is the x value for the vertex. This is also known as the axis of symmetry, and I'm 87% sure that this is how you spell symmetry. So my negative 2, my x value is the axis of symmetry. This is the axis of symmetry equation. And I'm halfway done with my vertex. I found one of my numbers. I need the other one. The only way I can find out the y knowing the x is plugging it in. And I like to do the superscript where I just put on top of it what the value of x is. That way I don't have to actually think too much about it. So I want to get this x out, and I want to get the negative 2 in. Now, a few of you are still having trouble with that concept. So what I do is I write on top of every x, I'm going to write the negative 2. And then I'm going to rewrite the whole thing. So all I want to do is plug in the negative 2 and see what that gives me. That is going to give me some y equals to something. Well, what is it equal to? Well, that'll be 2 times negative 2 squared plus 8 times negative 2 plus 6. Right? And once I have everything inside of the equation, I don't have any more x's. All I have to do is simplify this. I have to solve it. So you can put it in the calculator, but I will go ahead and do it here by hand. Now I have to follow order of operations. My exponent comes before multiplication. Be very careful. Just because PEMDAS says that parentheses comes first, that doesn't mean that you multiply the parentheses with something else. Parentheses in PEMDAS means do whatever is inside of the parentheses first. Well, I can't really do anything inside of the parentheses because all I have is a negative 2. So what comes next would be the exponents, not multiplications. And be very careful with that because that changes the answer of the problem. So here I'll do exponents first. So it'll be negative 2 squared, which will be negative 2 times negative 2, which will be 2 times positive 4, because a negative 2 times a negative 2 is a positive 4, plus 8 times negative 2. Well, 8 times negative 2 is negative 16. So that'll be negative 16 plus 6. Well, 2 times 4 is 8, so this will be y is equal to 8 minus 16 plus 6. So this will be y is equal to 8 minus 16 is negative 8. And negative 8 plus 6 is negative 2. So that will be my y value. And coincidentally, it's the same one as my x value. Not that that will always be the case. But if I want to write this as an answer, then my vertex will be negative 2, comma, negative 2. And I'm done with the vertex. Again, this is probably the part that takes the longest. It's 2 equations that you have to solve. You have to first find the value of x and then the value of y. Once you're done with that, we'll proceed to what has been the hardest part for us, which is finding the zeros. And not because finding the zeros is hard, but because of so many different ways of factoring. And I'm just going to do this one. I'm going to go through it, I guess, very fast. I will make a video with all the different kinds of factoring methods and all the different possibilities. But it's something that at this point you should already know. So let's just go ahead and do finding the zeros. So we'll find the zeros. So how do I find the zeros? Well, I have the equation y is equal to 2x squared plus 8x plus 6. And I need to find the value for the zeros. Now I know that I need to factor. I need to make sure whether this is a coefficient of 1, whether I have greatest common factor, or whether I have to do our slip and slide method, which is also known as the AC method. And that's something that you have to get good at. If you don't want to deal with it, if you say, well, you know what, I got really good with the quadratic formula and I just want to use the quadratic formula, then that is fine by me. However, I look at this and I see that I have a 2, a 4, and a 2, an 8, and a 6, and those are all even numbers. So I know that they're all divisible by 2, so I see that I have a greatest common factor. So I'm going to pull out the greatest common factor first. So this will be y is equal to 2 times, and remember that whenever you're getting the greatest common factor out, you're going to divide by the number that you're taking out. Well, 2 divided by 2 is going to give me x squared. Let's use another color. X squared plus 8 divided by 2 is 4. And 6 divided by 2 is 3. And there's my more simple quadratic equation, right? So I have y is equal to 2 times x squared plus 4x plus 3. Now this is a coefficient of 1 equation, and I'm just looking at this part right here. I guess you can't see me blocking it, but all I'm doing is I'm looking at this. Once I took that 2 out, that's out of the equation. I don't have to look at it anymore for the sake of finding the zeros. So I'm going to rewrite this, and this is going to be y is equal to 2 times whatever I'm left with. So now this is a coefficient of 1. So this is going to be a table. So I need to find the two numbers that multiply to 3 but add up to 4. And these are pretty small numbers, so I'm going to do the table just for the sake of showing you that again, but we should already know the answer. So on one side I have 3, which is what my numbers have to multiply to, and on the other side I have 4, which is what I have to add to. Now the only multiples of 3 are 1 and 3, so 1 times 3 is going to give me 3, and 1 plus 3 is going to give me 4. Now again, that's the only option that I have, so this will be x plus my factors, so x plus 1 and x plus 3, and that's it. Well, that's it for factoring. Now in order for me to find the zeros, I need to make sure that my y is equal to 0. So we've talked a lot about the shortcut, which is just taking out the opposite number of what's inside of the parentheses, and that is fine, but I have to show you what's really happening. So what this means is I'm finding the zero. So I'm finding when is my y 0. So what value of x is going to make my y 0? So this is going to be 0 is equal to 2 times x plus 1 times x plus 3. So, well, in order for me to get 0, either x plus 1 has to be 0, x plus 3 has to be 0, or both of them have to be zeros. So I want to know which values of these cause my y to be 0. Well, so this will be x plus 1 is equal to 0, and x plus 3 is equal to 0. Well, Mr. Correa, why don't I put 2 is equal to 0? What do I do with that 2? Well, 2 is a number. 2 can never be 0. 2 is always going to be 2. So it doesn't factor into what we're trying to do here. Now, this is just a BOD. It's a one-step equation. So this is going to be minus 1, and this will be x is equal to negative 1. And this over here is minus 3. This cancels, and this is x equals to negative 3. And again, Mr. Correa, you could have just said that x in here was positive 1, so I took it outside and it became the opposite, and x in here was plus 3 and it just became the opposite. And yes, that is fine. You can do that. You always take out the number and it becomes the opposite, but for the sake of teaching, I need to show you where those numbers actually come from. So I found the zeros. So my zeros are x is equal to negative 1 and x is equal to negative 3. And you could write it like that. You could write, I think we saw it on Delta Math as in brackets, and it said negative 1 comma negative 3. You know, there's a plethora of ways that you could write this answers as, but I'm okay if you just write x equals to negative 1, x equals to negative 3. Now, we're done with the hard part. So I believe that finding the vertex and finding the zeros are the hardest, more mechanical parts of the parabola. Now the next one is kind of a freebie. So the next one, part number 5, is finding the y-intercept. So find the y-intercept. Well, if you remember, the beautiful thing about working with the standard form is that when I have y is equal to ax squared plus bx plus c, my y-intercept is always going to be my c value. This is always my y-intercept. So my constant will always be my y-intercept. And that's the reason for that is that when I have a y-intercept when x is equal to 0. X must be 0 for me to have a y-intercept. Well, if my x is 0, then this goes away, that goes away, and the only thing I have left is c. So my original equation is y is equal to 2x squared plus 8x plus 6. And I know that if I plug in 0, this will cancel, so my y-intercept will be 6. So my y-intercept is equal to 6. That is it. Now the last thing I want to do is to sketch this with all the information that I've gotten. So this is going to be a pretty rough sketch. We don't have to get really technical with it, but I do want you to label all the parts that we found. So I'm going to sketch this parabola, and I will make a much longer video on how to properly sketch and everything that goes into sketching parabolas. But for now, let's go ahead and your sketch will be rougher than mine because I do have the tools here to make this a little neat, but it needs to be organized. So when you turn in your notes, this needs to be done with a ruler. If you don't have a ruler at home, then you should have still your ID. So use your ID to make your lines. If it's not neat, I will take points off for that. So make sure that the sketches are neat. They don't need to be perfect. They don't need to be equally spaced or anything, but I need to be able to find all the information that I've given you. So let's go ahead then and draw this out. So let's make that good. So the first thing I want to plug in is my vertex. So my vertex was -2, -2. All right, so my vertex was, and let's kind of write those here on the side. So my vertex was -2, -2. So I'm gonna go and find that on the graph. So that'll be, so this will be my x-axis, this will be my y-axis. So this will be -2, -2, and that will be my vertex. Well, the next thing I want is my zeros, and I said that my zeros were -1, and let me use the brackets, -1 and -3. Now remember that my zeros have to be equally spaced from my vertex because I do have a line of symmetry going right down the middle, which creates equal spacing between my two zeros. So I'm going to see that my zeros are both going to be 1 point away to each side of the function. So my zeros here would be -1 and -3. And again, from my vertex, they're both 1 away. The last thing I want here is my y-intercept. So my y-intercept we found out to just be the value of 6. And unfortunately for me, that's way off the graph. So what you would do in your paper, which I should have taken into consideration, is that this is going to go way up. So we'll say that for the sake of this drawing, we'll say that that is 6. Yes, it isn't, but you know, I want to show you what this has to look like. So all you're going to do is you're going to sketch this. So this will look something like that, and it just has to pass through the points. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to look like a perfect parabola. Matter of fact, this looks more like a V than a parabola. There you go, something like that. Anyway, so that's what your sketch should look like. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to pass through points. You just have to label them. So make sure you label your vertex, make sure you label your zeros and your y-intercept. I do want the information here on the side, and you'll be done. So I want you to do the next two examples. So, or rather the next two equations. So you're going to find all 6 things for y is equal, and we'll do number 1, y is equal to 3x squared minus 12x minus 15, and you'll do y is equal to negative x squared minus 2x plus 2. So go ahead and, following the video, do the same 6 steps for both of those, and then just go ahead and turn in your notes in Google Classroom. Okay, thank you, and have a rest of the day. I'll be online all the way until 11 a.m. so just go ahead and send me a question if you have any.